He left me to die with our newborn after my diagnosis 5 years later. I owned his company. He left me to die when I needed him most, weak, shivering, holding our newborn baby in my arms, still bleeding from the hospital bed where life and death met. The diagnosis had just come: lymphoma, the doctor said, his eyes heavy with pity. But Ethan, my husband, didn't shed a tear. He looked at me like I was already gone. "I can't do this, Grace," he said coldly. "You're sick. You can't work. You can't even hold your head up. What kind of life is this for me?" Then he turned his back, picked up his phone, and walked into the arms of Vanessa Brooks, my best friend, the woman who once promised to help me plan our baby shower. He left me alone, with nothing but a crying baby, unpaid hospital bills, and a heart too weak to keep beating. I thought it was over. I thought that was where my story ended. But pain doesn't always bury you, sometimes it plants you. And the woman he left to die would one day stand over everything he built. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about survival, dignity, and divine justice. How a broken mother became the architect of her own empire. Dear viewers, as we begin, I ask you to stay, subscribe, and in the comments tell us where you're watching from. Because somewhere, another woman is fighting her battle, and she needs to know she's not alone. The hospital room was too quiet, too clean for the kind of news that could break a soul. Grace Miller held her newborn daughter, Sophia, close against her chest as the doctor's voice sliced through the silence. "Mrs. Miller," he said softly, "your biopsy results are back. It's lymphoma, but we caught it early with immediate treatment. You have a strong chance." Grace froze. The words didn't make sense. She looked down at Sophia, her tiny hand curling weakly around her mother's finger, the soft rhythm of her breathing grounding her in reality. "I just had my baby," she whispered. "How can this be happening now?" Across the room, Ethan Miller, her husband, stood by the window, scrolling on his phone. The light from the screen reflected in his cold eyes. He didn't move, didn't even look at her. "Ethan?" she said softly, her voice cracking. "Did you hear him? It's cancer." "I heard," he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "So, what now? How long is this going to take?" The doctor blinked. "Chemotherapy would begin within the week. The side effects can be tough fatigue, hair loss, nausea." "Hair loss?" Ethan cut in sharply. "How long will she be like that?" Grace stared at him in disbelief. "Like that? I'm sick, Ethan. I could die." He sighed, his expression twisting. "You always make everything sound worse than it is. Maybe if you stopped worrying so much." The doctor cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'll give you both a moment." He left quietly, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Grace's chest rose and fell rapidly as tears blurred her vision. "Ethan, please. I just need you to stand with me. I'm scared." Ethan turned away, staring out at the city lights. "I can't handle this, Grace. I have a company to run. Investors don't wait for sick wives and crying babies." Her voice broke. "I'm your wife. This is your daughter." He didn't look back. "You'll be fine." The door clicked shut as he left, and the sound echoed louder than any argument could. Grace looked down at Sophia, her tiny face resting peacefully against her mother's heart. The tears fell freely now. "Don't worry, my baby," she whispered shakily. "Mommy's not going anywhere." But deep down, her body already felt like it was betraying her cell by cell. Outside, a nurse passed by and paused to peek in. Dr. Maya Robinson, Grace's oncologist, stood behind the glass for a moment, watching the young mother wipe her tears and force a brave smile for her child. Maya whispered to herself, "She's stronger than she knows." And in the corridor's reflection, Vanessa Brooks appeared, bringing a bouquet and a secret text already waiting on Ethan's phone. Tomorrow, Grace's fight for life would begin, and so would Ethan's slow descent into ruin. The knife slammed against the porcelain plate. "Do you really have to eat like that?" Ethan's voice cut through the air, sharper than the sound itself. Grace froze mid-bite, her hands trembling slightly. It was her first meal home after starting chemotherapy. The faint scent of hospital sanitizer still lingered on her skin, no matter how hard she scrubbed. The dining room glowed under a silver chandelier, but the air felt colder than the marble floor beneath her feet. Across from her sat Ethan, perfectly dressed, scrolling through his phone. His mother, Helen Miller, sipped her wine slowly, her gaze filled with judgment. "You look tired," Helen said, her tone dripping with false concern. "Perhaps you should stay upstairs when guests visit. No one wants to lose their appetite." Grace tried to smile, though her lips quivered. "It's just the treatment, Helen. I'm managing." "Managing?" Helen scoffed. "Ethan works day and night to build this family's name, and you're here, managing." Her eyes drifted to the baby monitor on the table, where soft coos came from the nursery. "And dragging a baby into this chaos when you can barely stand? Irresponsible." Grace's chest tightened. She turned to Ethan, silently begging for him to stop his mother. He didn't even look up. "Helen," she said softly, "I know you're worried, but—" "Worried?" Helen interrupted, her voice rising. "I'm ashamed. My son didn't marry a charity case." The words struck like stones. Grace's fork slipped from her hand, clattering on the plate. Her throat burned, but she forced herself to swallow her tears. "I didn't choose this illness," she whispered. Ethan looked up then, finally, but his eyes weren't filled with empathy. They were tired, distant, cold. "She's right," he said. "This house feels heavy. I come home and it's like walking into a hospital ward." Grace's heart dropped. "Ethan, please. I'm trying. I still do the accounting, the cooking." He cut her off. "That's not the point. You're different now. I just need peace." Helen smirked, swirling her wine. "Peace doesn't come from sickness, my dear. It comes from strong women. Like Vanessa." The name hit Grace like a knife. "Vanessa?" she repeated quietly. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. A message flashed on the screen before he quickly turned it over. "Vanessa Brooks, proud of you tonight. You deserve better." Grace stared at the phone, her vision blurring. Her closest friend, the same woman who once brought her soup after chemo sessions. Her hands tightened into fists beneath the table. The rest of the dinner passed in silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware. Ethan and his mother talked about business, events, image, all the things that no longer included her. When the plates were cleared, Grace stood slowly, her legs weak. "I'll check on Sophia," she murmured, her voice small. No one stopped her. As she climbed the stairs, she heard Helen whisper, "He needs to think about his future, not drag around dead weight." Grace paused mid-step, her hand gripping the rail as tears rolled down her face. Upstairs, she walked into the nursery, sat beside her baby and whispered, "It's okay, my love. Mommy's here. We'll be okay." But when she looked back through the half-open door, she saw Ethan on his phone again, smiling faintly. Her chest ached with something new, not just pain, but a quiet knowing. Something inside her whispered, "He's slipping away." And she had no idea that the next time she woke up in that hospital bed, he would already be gone. The heart monitor screamed. Grace's body jerked as the nurse rushed in, followed by Dr. Maya Robinson. Her veins burned where the chemo line dripped, her pulse wild. Sweat drenched her hospital gown. She tried to lift her head, but the room spun into gray. "Stay still, Mrs. Miller," Dr. Maya said firmly, checking her vitals. "You're dehydrated. We'll need to keep you overnight." Grace nodded weakly, barely able to speak. "Can you call my husband? Please." The nurse picked up the phone, dialed and handed it to Grace. Ethan's voice answered, cold, distant. "Ethan," Grace whispered, her lips trembling. "I'm not doing well. They want me to stay tonight. Can you come? Just for a little while." There was silence on the line, then a sigh. "I'm in a meeting," he said. "You'll be fine. Don't make everything dramatic, Grace." "I'm scared," she choked. He cut her off. "I'll check in later." The call ended. Her hand dropped. The phone slid off the bed and hit the floor with a hollow sound. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Olivia, the kind nurse from before, stayed late, adjusting the IV with gentle hands. "He'll come, honey," she said quietly. "Sometimes people freeze under pressure." Grace wanted to believe her, but the emptiness beside her bed said otherwise. By morning, the sunlight that crept through the blinds was pale and cruel. Grace blinked awake to the rustle of papers. Dr. Maya was standing at the foot of her bed, holding a discharge form. "Who authorized this?" Grace asked weakly. "Your husband, doctor," Maya said softly. "He signed you out, against medical advice." Grace's stomach twisted. "But I can't even walk." I tried to stop him, the doctor said, eyes filled with pity. He said he'd take you home. Before Grace could reply, the door opened. Ethan stepped in crisp shirt, polished shoes, no warmth in his face. Get dressed, he said flatly. We're leaving. Grace stared at him. Why? I'm not ready, the doctor said. He slammed the papers on the bed. We can't afford to waste money here. You look fine. Stop acting like a victim. Her breath caught. Ethan, I'm not acting. I could die. He turned away. Then die at home. I'm tired of this pity show. The room went silent except for the IV's rhythmic beep. Olivia stepped forward, her voice trembling. Sir, please. She's too weak to go. Ethan's glare silenced her. Stay out of it. Grace tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Ethan didn't help her. He grabbed her bag, tossed it onto the wheelchair, and pushed her toward the door. The bracelet on her wrist. Patient Grace Miller slipped down her arm, catching the sunlight one last time before it fell to the floor. As the door shut behind them, Olivia bent down and picked it up. Her eyes followed Grace's fading figure. Under her breath, she whispered, No one deserves this. And that night, as the rain began to fall outside the hospital windows, Olivia made a decision that would change Grace's fate forever. The door slammed so hard the baby woke screaming. Grace stumbled into the rain, her hospital gown hidden under Ethan's old coat, her body trembling from weakness. The cold stung her bald scalp as thunder cracked across the sky. Ethan's voice echoed behind her, sharp and final. Don't come back, you hear me? You're on your own, Grace. I'm done playing nurse to a dying woman. Then the door locked. She stood there, clutching Sophia against her chest, the infant wailing in the storm. The street was empty. The neighbors' curtains twitched, but no one opened their doors. She tried to move, but her knees gave way. She collapsed beside the curb, the rain washing her tears into the gutter. For the first time, she realized she might actually die not from the cancer, but from being forgotten. Headlights cut through the downpour. A small car stopped, the door opened, and a familiar voice shouted, Grace? Grace Miller? It was Nurse Olivia Grant, the woman who had comforted her through those long chemo nights. She ran out with an umbrella, soaked within seconds. My God! Olivia gasped, helping her up. What are you doing here? Where's your husband? Grace couldn't answer. She just cried. Olivia looked at the tiny baby clinging to her mother's chest, her eyes softening with fury. Get in the car. Now. Minutes later, Grace found herself wrapped in a warm blanket in Olivia's modest apartment. The kitchen smelled of coffee and baby powder. Olivia's home was small but full of light-framed family photos, knitted throws, and a faint hum of gospel music in the background. You'll stay here for now, Olivia said gently, setting down a steaming bowl of soup. Eat. You need strength. Grace stared at the bowl, her hands shaking. I can't take this from you. You're not taking anything, Olivia said firmly. You're surviving. That's what women do. The warmth hit Grace's throat like fire and comfort all at once. She ate slowly, tears falling into the bowl. For the first time in weeks, someone was kind. Later that night, as Sophia slept in a borrowed crib, Grace sat by the kitchen window. Olivia joined her, 2 cups of tea steaming between them. I know what it's like, Olivia said softly. My husband left when I got sick years ago, said he couldn't handle watching me fall apart. She smiled faintly. He didn't stay to see me rise again either. Grace looked at her, something sparking in her chest. How did you start over? Olivia shrugged. One day at a time. One number at a time. Grace frowned. Numbers? I file hospital bills part-time, Olivia explained. There's always work for careful eyes. Grace's heart stirred. She used to be an accountant. Before sickness stole her purpose. Before betrayal stole her peace. She looked down at her trembling hands and whispered, Maybe I can help. Olivia smiled. Then you'll start tomorrow. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world was still. Grace looked at the sleeping baby and touched her wrist where the hospital bracelet had once been. A small light flickered inside her, faint but alive. And in that quiet apartment, the woman Ethan had thrown away began her first step back to life. What she didn't know was that one of those hospital bills she'd start filing soon would carry a name she once loved. The paper tower collapsed. Grace gasped as hundreds of medical bills scattered across the clinic's small office floor. fluttering like snow. The old calculator on the desk beeped wildly. She bent down, weak from chemo, her arms trembling, trying to gather the files before the fan blew them apart. "Careful!" Olivia called from the hallway, rushing in. "These belong to the accounts department. They fine people if even one is misplaced." "I'm sorry," Grace whispered, clutching a handful of documents. "I was just trying to organize the unpaid records." Before Olivia could reply, a firm voice echoed from behind them. "Who authorized you to touch those?" They turned. A woman in her 40s stood by the door, sharp gray suit, confident stride, intelligent eyes. Her name tag read, Clara Hayes, Audit Manager. She was known around the hospital for her precision and for never missing a number. "I did," Olivia said quickly, stepping forward. "Grace has been helping me with sorting. She used to be an accountant." Clara arched a brow. "An accountant?" She looked at Grace skeptically. "Show me what you've done." Grace's stomach twisted. Her hands shook as she lifted the files onto the desk. I just noticed some patterns in the patient. Charges," she said softly. They didn't add up. Clara adjusted her glasses and scanned the files. Within seconds, her expression changed from annoyance to surprise. Every mismatched number was underlined. Every misplaced charge corrected in red pen. The columns were perfectly balanced. She looked up slowly. "You did this?" Grace nodded, unsure if she had crossed a line. "I didn't mean to interfere. Numbers calm me. They make sense when nothing else does." Clara placed the file down. "Do you know how long my team's been trying to trace this error?" "No," Grace whispered. 3 weeks. Olivia smiled faintly from behind. Clara crossed her arms. "Where did you work before?" "Golden Gate Accounting," Grace said. "Until my illness." Clara tapped her pen against her chin, studying her. "You're sharp, I can tell. How do you feel about actual work? Part-time, flexible hours, reviewing patient accounts?" Grace blinked. "You mean a job?" Clara's lips curved slightly. "I mean a chance." For a moment, Grace couldn't breathe. After everything, the hospital, the abandonment, the cold nights feeding Sophia with watered milk, someone finally saw her worth again. Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Clara smiled. "Good. Report to me tomorrow. Bring your calculator, not your fear." That night, Grace sat by the window of Olivia's small apartment, looking at the city lights. She whispered to her sleeping baby, "Mommy's working again." Her reflection in the glass looked fragile but alive. The storm inside her had begun to quiet, replaced by something steadier purpose. But as she filed her first set of records the next day, one company name kept appearing across multiple invoices, the name that froze her blood and sent her hands trembling over the keyboard. Miller Dynamics, her husband's company. The same man who left her to die was about to unknowingly hand her the first thread that could unravel everything he built. The stapler slipped from Grace's hand and hit the floor with a sharp crack. Her eyes stayed frozen on the header printed at the top of the invoice in front of her. Miller Dynamics Health Partnership Account. Her pulse quickened. That name, his name, cut through her like ice. She whispered it under her breath. Ethan Miller. Clara Hayes, the audit manager, looked up from her desk. "Something wrong, Grace?" Grace quickly gathered herself. "No, ma'am, just double-checking the reference numbers." "Good," Clara said, tapping her keyboard. "We're doing internal reviews for several partner companies. If you see inconsistencies, flag them. We'll need transparency for all our corporate donors." Transparency. The word stung. Ethan had built his life on lies, especially about money. As Clara left the office for a meeting, Grace sat alone under the pale glow of her computer screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Row after row of numbers blurred together donations, invoices, and funding reports tied to Miller Dynamics' charity division. Something didn't add up. The payments from Miller Dynamics came in large, clean numbers, every 30 days. But the hospital's matching records showed no corresponding credits. It looked perfect, too perfect. Grace zoomed in on one entry. The signatory read Trevor Kane, CFO. Trevor, Ethan's best friend. The man who toasted them at their wedding. Her hands trembled. She tried to focus, whispering to herself, "Stay calm. Just numbers. Just work." But the ache in her chest wouldn't stop. The man who threw her out was now moving hospital funds meant for patients like her. She clenched her fists. "You're still taking, even from the sick," she muttered. "Grace?" She looked up to see a tall man in glasses standing at her desk. His ID read Miraculously, forensic auditor. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said with a calm smile. "Clara said you're the new one who sees through numbers like glass." "Impressive." Grace forced a polite nod. "Just trying to do my part." Marcus leaned closer, his voice low. "Miller Dynamics, right? Their books smell funny. You notice it too?" Grace hesitated. "Maybe, but I'm still confirming." Marcus smiled knowingly. "Be careful, that company's got layers, hidden ledgers, offshore accounts. I've been chasing their trail for months." Her stomach turned. "You think it's fraud?" He straightened. "I think it's worse." Grace looked back at the screen, her reflection ghosting over the Miller Dynamics logo. The woman in the glass didn't look sick anymore, she looked determined. "Can you help me find the truth?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "If you're ready to risk it." She thought of Olivia's kindness, of Sophia's small fingers curling around hers, of Ethan's voice saying, "You're nothing but a burden." Grace lifted her chin. "Then I'm ready." That night, as she left the office, she walked past the glass building across the street, Miller Dynamics headquarters. Through the wide windows, she saw Ethan and Vanessa laughing with champagne glasses in hand. Her stomach tightened, but her eyes stayed cold. Because for the first time, she wasn't running from the past, she was walking straight toward it. And inside that laughter-filled building, one secret ledger waited for her to open it. The champagne cork exploded like a gunshot. Golden liquid rained over a sea of applause as Ethan Miller raised his glass under the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Lux Hotel. Cameras flashed from every corner. The banner behind him read in bold gold letters, "Miller Dynamics, celebrating record profits." "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan announced, voice confident and proud, "tonight isn't just about numbers. It's about resilience, leadership, and family." Beside him stood Vanessa Brooks, dazzling in a silver gown. Her manicured hand rested on his arm as she smiled for the cameras, the perfect picture of success. But behind her gloss lips, her eyes darted nervously toward Trevor Kane, the company's CFO, standing near the stage with a stiff smile and sweat glistening on his temple. Trevor forced a toast. "To the man who rebuilt Miller Dynamics from the ground up." His voice cracked slightly. Vanessa's smile tightened. The crowd clapped again, believing every word. But behind the luxury, lies were stacked higher than the champagne glasses. At that exact moment, miles away, Grace sat in her small apartment, staring at her laptop screen. The live news feed showed Ethan's face, bright and proud. The headline read, "Ethan Miller, the visionary CEO." Her chest ached, not from sickness this time, but from disbelief. The same man who left her starving was being praised for funding the very hospitals he'd stolen from. Olivia entered with a cup of tea. "Turn it off, honey. Don't let his lies steal your peace." Grace shook her head. "No, Olivia. Lies only win when truth stays silent." She zoomed in on the newsfeed. In the background, she noticed Trevor Kane glancing at a folder. Vanessa clutched tightly, a white envelope marked donor funds. Grace froze. "He's still moving money through the hospital system." Olivia frowned. "What do you mean?" Grace whispered. "Those accounts. I've seen them in the audits." Her fingers trembled over the keyboard as she began tracing the numbers again. Each invoice led to another shell account. Each shell account led back to Ethan Miller's signature. Back at the gala, Vanessa leaned close to Ethan, her perfume thick with tension. "The numbers don't look right, Ethan. The press will notice." Ethan smirked. "Relax. As long as Trevor keeps the ledgers clean, no one will question us. We just need one more quarter of fake donations before the new investors buy in." Trevor's eyes flickered toward them. He heard every word and he looked terrified. As the band played and guests danced, Ethan and Vanessa posed for photos. "To love that never fades," she toasted playfully, her voice dripping with irony. Ethan kissed her cheek for the cameras, but the moment the flashes stopped, he whispered coldly, "Don't forget your place." Her smile faltered. Trevor turned toward the bar, muttering to himself, "This is going to collapse." And on the opposite side of the city, Grace printed out her findings, line by line. Evidence of fraud, hidden under layers of glamour. She stared at Ethan's photo on her screen, her voice steady and low. You built your empire on sickness, Ethan. Now it's time for truth to cure it. The printer finished whirring. The last page rolled out, the company seal glinting faintly under the lamplight. At the bottom of the document, one small note caught her eye, a signature authorization for upcoming donor verification. It was scheduled for next week at Miller Dynamics headquarters. Grace exhaled slowly. Her hand hovered over the folder of evidence. She knew exactly where she would be next Friday. The spreadsheet cracked open like a secret vault. Grace's eyes darted between two columns, one labeled Donor Health Relief Fund and another Executive Allocations. The totals matched perfectly, but one was for patients, the other for luxury bonuses. Her pulse quickened. No, she whispered, this can't be right. She enlarged the files, clicking through the ledger line by line. Transactions rolled down the screen, hospital donations rerouted into offshore accounts, all signed by the same two names, Ethan Miller and Trevor Kane. Her fingers trembled as she printed the pages. The sound of the printer echoed through the small office, each sheet sliding out like a verdict. The door creaked open. It was Marcus Lee, the quiet forensic auditor who had been helping her piece together numbers for weeks. His eyes widened when he saw the pile of documents. Grace, what did you find? She handed him the top sheet. Fraud. Massive fraud. He's been using hospital donations to fund his fake profits. Marcus skimmed the lines, his face hardening. This is criminal. I know, she said quietly. And it's not just numbers anymore. He's stealing from sick people, people like me. Marcus sat beside her. We can't take this to him directly. We'll need to go through the bureau. Grace stared at the glowing company logo on her monitor, Miller Dynamics, building healthier futures. Her voice trembled. He left me to die during chemo, and now he's stealing from patients who can't afford it. How much lower can he go? Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Grace, listen. Once we expose this, you can't go back. They'll come for you. Her eyes met his clear, determined, and no longer afraid. They already did once, she said, and I survived. He nodded slowly. Then we do this right. I'll back you up, but we'll need evidence from the source. She opened a folder on her desk, flash drives, printouts, time-stamped transfers, screenshots. Her meticulous mind had tracked every inconsistency for months. I have everything, she said. Marcus took a deep breath. Then tomorrow, we submit the report anonymously to the Financial Crime Bureau. Silence filled the room. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but steady. Grace looked out the window at the city skyline, her reflection blending with the lights. For the first time, she didn't see a victim. She saw a woman standing on the edge of justice. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small, the old hospital bracelet Olivia had kept for her. The faded tag still read, Patient Grace Miller. She tied it around her wrist. For every woman who was left behind, she whispered, for every mother who was called worthless. Marcus turned off the lights. You sure you're ready for this? Grace nodded. Ready enough to finish what he started. As they stepped out of the building, the night air felt sharp and alive. Grace clutched the flash drive tight in her palm. Tomorrow, she would send it. Tomorrow, Ethan's empire would begin to fall. But she didn't know someone else had already seen her copying those files. And by sunrise, that person would make a call that could change everything. The email cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Grace's finger hovered over the send button, the flash drive plugged into her computer like a loaded weapon. Every file, every chart, every signature was their months of fraud compressed into a single truth. She stared at the subject line she'd typed, Confidential, Miller Dynamics Financial Crimes, Evidence Submission. Her chest heaved. This was it, the line between fear and freedom. Grace, are you sure? Marcus asked, his voice low but urgent. He stood by the window, checking the street below. Once you send this, there's no going back. You'll be their enemy. Grace's hand trembled. They were already my enemy when they left me to die. She pressed send. The screen blinked, and it was done. The files vanished into the encrypted inbox of the Financial Crime Bureau. Marcus exhaled slowly. You just changed everything. But then, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Grace froze. Did you see that? Marcus moved toward the door and peeked into the hall. Empty. Probably maintenance, but his voice wasn't steady. He closed the blinds and locked the door. We should leave separately tonight, just in case. Grace nodded, packing the printed copies into her satchel. She paused, pulling out her phone. On the screen was a photo of Sophia sleeping beside her teddy bear, her little chest rising and falling. She whispered, "For you, my love." The storm outside cracked open, lightning flashing through the blinds. Grace turned off her laptop and slipped the hospital bracelet tighter around her wrist, a silent armor. Marcus stepped closer. "You know what's ironic?" he said softly. Grace looked up. "The same man who thought you were too weak to fight him has no idea you're the one holding the match." Grace smiled faintly. "Let's see how his empire burns." They exited the small office into the dark corridor. The hum of the building felt different tonight, colder, aware. Grace stopped when she saw the faint shadow of someone at the far end of the hall. "Marcus," she whispered, but the figure turned away before she could see a face, disappearing down the stairwell. They walked faster. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped in. Grace's reflection glowed against the metal walls, tired but strong. As the doors slid shut, she caught her own eyes and whispered, "They'll never silence me again." When they reached the ground floor, the security guard nodded stiffly. "Long night?" Grace smiled faintly. "Just finished something important." Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights cast pools of amber light across the wet pavement. Marcus hailed a cab for her. "Stay quiet for a few days," he said. "They'll come asking questions soon. When they do, you say nothing." Grace nodded. "Understood." She got into the cab, watching the city blur past the window. A strange calm filled her chest, not peace, but resolve. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, answered. A woman's voice purred through the line, low and mocking. Well. Still alive, Grace? It's Vanessa. I heard you've been busy." Grace's grip tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" "Oh, nothing," Vanessa said sweetly. "Just thought you should know. Ethan knows someone's been snooping around. And he's coming. For you." The line went dead. Grace stared out into the dark streets, her pulse pounding. Tomorrow the storm would not just be outside, it would come straight for her door. The sirens wailed before sunrise. Red and blue lights flooded the polished glass of Miller Dynamics' headquarters as security officers shouted for staff to step away from their desks. The front doors burst open, and men in dark suits stormed in, flashing badges from the Financial Crime Bureau. "Freeze all transfers," one of them barked. "Seize every document, every drive, every file linked to Ethan Miller and Trevor Kane." Inside his office on the top floor, Ethan slammed his fist against the desk. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, grabbing his phone. Vanessa, dressed in a designer coat, stood by the window, her face pale but her voice controlled. "They said it's a fraud investigation. Someone tipped them off." "Who?" Ethan roared. "Who would dare do this to me?" Before Vanessa could answer, the door flew open, and Trevor Kane stumbled in, his tie loosened, his face drenched in sweat. "Ethan, they've got everything, emails, ledgers, transfers. They're saying we stole from hospitals." Ethan turned on him like a wild animal. "You told me you cleaned the ledgers." I did," Trevor stammered, trembling. "But someone leaked the originals." Ethan grabbed his collar. "Who?" Trevor's voice cracked. "It had to come from inside the hospital. Someone with accounting access." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, her lips curling into a smirk she quickly hid. "Grace Miller used to work in accounting, didn't she?" Ethan froze. "Grace?" His grip loosened. "She's nothing. She wouldn't dare." Vanessa stepped closer, her tone sharp. "Then why are her initials on some of the matching audit reports?" Ethan's face went pale. "That's impossible." Downstairs, journalists swarmed the building as agents carried out boxes, out of evidence. Cameras flashed. The world was watching his empire crumble. Across town, Grace sat in her small apartment, watching the live broadcast on television. The screen showed Ethan being ushered out of the lobby, shouting, "This is a setup! I'm innocent!" Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming power of justice finally turning. Olivia sat beside her, baby Sophia on her lap, whispering, "You did it, Grace. You really did it." Grace shook her head slowly. "No, the truth did." The camera zoomed in on Vanessa, walking beside Ethan, pretending to look devastated. But Grace noticed the distance between them, the way Vanessa's eyes flickered to the cameras, already preparing her next move. "She's playing him," Grace murmured. "She'll save herself first." At the bureau headquarters, Trevor sat in an interrogation room, his hands trembling. Detective Harold Stone, calm but stern, placed the evidence files on the table. "Mr. Kane, your partner's blaming you. Says you orchestrated everything." Trevor's eyes widened. "He what?" "Help us," the detective said softly. "Tell us what really happened, and maybe we can help you." Trevor stared at the one-way mirror. He could almost see Ethan's reflection on the other side. Laughing, rich, untouchable. Rage twisted in his gut. He swallowed hard. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth? I'll give you every file, every email, every offshore account. Ethan and Vanessa planned everything. I just followed orders." Detective Stone leaned back, satisfied. "Good man." That night, the headlines spread like wildfire. Miller Dynamics fraud exposed investors. Pull out. CEO under investigation. Grace closed her laptop, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but release. Years of pain were finally cracking open into light. But just as she reached to turn off the lamp, her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "This isn't over. You ruined me, Grace, and you'll pay for it. E.M." She froze, staring at the glowing letters in the dark. Then, somewhere in the distance, another news alert appeared on the TV. Ethan Miller released on bail vows, revenge. The battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The gavel slammed against the wooden block. "Order in the court!" the judge barked as cameras flashed from the gallery. The packed courtroom buzzed with whispers. At the center, Ethan Miller sat rigid beside his attorney, his once polished suit now wrinkled, his eyes hollow. To his left, Vanessa Brooks kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, her lips trembling, but her poise unbroken. Across the aisle sat Grace Miller, calm and silent. Her dark dress was simple, her bald head now covered by a light scarf. The hospital bracelet peeked faintly from her wrist, a quiet reminder of where her fight began. At the prosecutor's table, Alan Pierce, the government attorney, rose to his feet. His voice echoed through the chamber, firm and clear. "Your Honor, we present the final piece of evidence linking Miller Dynamics' fraudulent charity accounts directly to Ethan Miller's personal gain. The whistleblower's documents have been verified by both the Bureau and the forensic audit team." Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "Lies, all of it. Someone forged those." Alan didn't flinch. "Really? Then perhaps you'd like to explain the $48 million transferred to your offshore account in the Cayman Islands signed by you and your mistress, Vanessa Brooks." A gasp rippled through the audience. Vanessa turned to him, eyes blazing. "You said they'd never trace it." Ethan glared at her. "You're the one who handled the transfers." "Enough," the judge thundered. "You'll both have your turn." Alan nodded toward the bench. "If it pleases the court, I'd like to reveal the whistleblower's identity. The one who risked everything to uncover the truth." Ethan chuckled bitterly. "Whoever it is, they're finished. No one crosses me and walks free." Alan stepped aside. The back door opened. Grace rose quietly, walking toward the stand. The room went silent. Ethan's face drained of color. "No, it can't be you." Grace met his eyes. "You said I was nothing, Ethan. You said I'd never stand again. But here I am, standing on the truth you tried to bury." Cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd murmured her name, Grace Miller, the whistleblower. Alan approached the judge. "Your Honor, the whistleblower has requested that instead of financial compensation, she be awarded equity ownership in the recovered assets to rebuild the company with transparency and integrity." The judge nodded. "Request granted. The court hereby transfers 20% of Miller Dynamics assets to Grace Miller as restitution and recognition for her service to justice." Ethan slumped in his chair, face pale. Vanessa buried her head in her hands. Grace inhaled slowly, tears glinting but unshed. "I didn't destroy you, Ethan. You destroyed yourself the moment you traded love for greed." The gavel struck again. Case closed. As the courtroom erupted in noise cameras, gasps, reporters shouting questions, Grace turned and walked past Ethan. He reached for her wrist weakly. "Grace, please," he whispered. voice cracking. Don't let them take everything. She looked down at him, eyes calm and sad. They're not taking it, Ethan. They're returning it. She stepped into the corridor, sunlight pouring through the courthouse windows, her hospital bracelet glinting softly. But as she walked outside, a crowd swarmed her with cheers and questions, and through it, a single figure watched from a distance. Helen Miller, Ethan's mother, clutching her purse with trembling hands, her face pale with shame. She turned away and whispered, "God forgive us," because tomorrow she would come to Grace's door not to scold her, but to beg. The courthouse doors burst open into a storm of flashing cameras and shouting voices. "Mrs. Miller, how does it feel to expose your husband? Grace, do you plan to rebuild the company? Do you forgive him?" Grace didn't answer. She simply walked steady, graceful, the same quiet strength that once trembled in a hospital bed now shining through her calm face. Reporters pressed closer, microphones waving, until Detective Harold Stone stepped in front of her and cleared a path. "Let her breathe, people." Outside, the morning sun glared across the marble steps. Ethan Miller stood at the bottom, surrounded by police officers. His wrists were cuffed, his suit wrinkled, his face streaked with sweat and tears. The man who once looked untouchable now looked hollow, broken glass in human form. "Grace!" he shouted, voice hoarse. "Please, don't walk away." She stopped halfway down the steps. The crowd fell silent. Cameras zoomed in. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Grace, please," Ethan begged, falling to his knees. "I was stupid, I was weak. I didn't know what I had." His voice cracked, desperation rising. "I've lost everything. The company, the house, even Vanessa's gone. I only have you left." Grace stared at him, her heart pounding but her face calm. "No, Ethan," she said quietly. "You had me, and you threw me away." He shook his head, tears spilling. "I was scared. You were sick. I didn't know how to handle it. I thought if I started over, I could escape it all." She stepped closer, her voice still soft but cutting through the air. "You didn't escape, Ethan. You infected everything you touched with the same disease pride." Reporters held their breath. Even the officers froze. Ethan reached for her hand, but she didn't move. He whispered, "Please, say you forgive me. I can't live knowing. You hate me." Grace looked down, tears filling her eyes, not for him, but for the years she lost, believing his love was her lifeline. "I forgive you," she said at last. "But forgiveness doesn't mean return. It means I've let go of what you broke." He blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm free," she whispered. Ethan broke completely, sobbing into his hands as the crowd looked on. Grace turned, the sun catching the silver glint of the hospital bracelet still on her wrist. It shimmered like a quiet crown, not of pity, but of victory earned through pain. As she walked away, reporters shouted her name, flashes lit the air, but she didn't look back. She passed through the sea of people and into the waiting car. Olivia sat inside, holding baby Sophia. Olivia smiled faintly. "You did it." Grace's eyes softened as she buckled Sophia in. "No, truth did it." The car pulled away slowly. In the rear window, Ethan was still on his knees, the world watching his collapse. Grace rested her head against the seat, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. But as they turned the corner, a black car began following them unmarked, its windows tinted. Olivia noticed it first. "Grace, someone's behind us." Grace opened her eyes, her calm returning like steel. Let them follow. Because the next time she stepped into that company building, she wouldn't be the broken wife, she'd be the one giving orders. The boardroom was silent until the doors slammed open. Every executive turned their heads as Grace Miller stepped in, dressed in a crisp white suit, her scarf neatly tied, her hospital bracelet still gleaming faintly against her wrist like a mark of survival. She carried a folder under her arm, not heavy, but commanding. The nameplate on the wall still read Miller Dynamics, though half the board had already resigned. Peter Chang, the oldest board member and acting chairman, rose immediately. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice careful but respectful. "We didn't expect you here so soon." Grace walked to the head of the table. "You should have," she said softly. "After all, I own 20% of this company now." A few members exchanged nervous glances. The company's logo flickered weakly on the projector, a symbol of decay. Peter cleared his throat. The company is in crisis, Grace. Stocks have dropped 80%, the media's ruthless, and investors are pulling out. We need a new face, someone the world can trust. Grace laid the folder on the table, flipping it open. Inside were detailed plans for restructuring, charity reinvestment, and a new name. Her tone was calm, steady. You don't need a new face, she said. You need a new heart. A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus Lee, the forensic auditor who had worked beside her through the investigation, leaned forward. I've reviewed her proposal, he said. It's clean, transparent, and it rebuilds public trust through hospital reinvestments. If we want to survive, she's our best chance. Peter nodded slowly, then looked around the room. All those in favor of appointing Grace Miller as acting CEO for the Reformation phase, raise your hands. For a long second, no one moved. Then one hand went up. Clara Hayes, the mentor who had first discovered Grace's gift for numbers. Then Marcus. Then two more. Finally, every hand was raised. Peter turned to Grace with a faint smile. The vote is unanimous. Congratulations, Mrs. Miller. Grace took a slow breath. The woman who once begged for food during chemo now stood at the very top of the empire that had discarded her. She looked out through the glass wall at the city skyline, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Then let's rebuild it, she said quietly. The right way. Applause broke out, polite but genuine. As the meeting ended, Grace stood alone for a moment, touching the edge of the old company name on the wall. She whispered, "No more lies." Marcus stepped beside her. "You know, Ethan will see this on the news," he said softly. Grace's eyes flickered with calm fire. "Then he'll finally see what strength looks like." Outside, reporters were already gathering, sensing the announcement to come. Grace squared her shoulders and headed toward the door, her heels clicking like punctuation marks of destiny. But as she reached for the handle, Peter caught her arm gently. "One more thing," he said. "Vanessa Brooks called the office this morning. She's asking for a meeting." Grace's lips curved faintly, not in anger, but in quiet readiness. "Then let her come," she said. "It's time we both see what truth looks like in daylight." And as she walked out to face the press, the lights flared, the start of her public rebirth. The cameras flashed as the elevator doors opened. Grace stepped out, every light in the lobby reflecting off the new silver logo mounted on the wall. The Sophia Group. The old Miller Dynamics name was gone, replaced with something purer, built from truth. The same building where she had once walked in as an abandoned wife now greeted her as its CEO. The press waited, rows of microphones angled toward her. She took the stage with steady poise, flanked by the people who had believed in her: Olivia Grant, Dr. Maya Robinson, Clara Hayes, and Marcus Lee. Each stood not just as colleagues, but as survivors who had helped her rise. "Good morning," Grace began, her voice clear and calm. "This company was born from lies, but today it stands on truth. We are rebuilding from the ashes, not for profit, but for people. The Sophia Group will fund hospitals, provide free cancer treatment for mothers, and create opportunities for those forgotten by the world, just like I once was." The crowd fell silent, many reporters lowering their cameras as emotion thickened in the air. Clara wiped a tear discreetly. "You did it," she whispered. Grace smiled softly. "We did it." A large screen behind her came alive with images: children in hospitals, nurses at work, families reunited through the Sophia Foundation's outreach. Each clip told a story of renewal, hope, and the healing power of compassion. As she finished her speech, applause thundered through the hall. Grace bowed her head slightly, the moment humbling her more than triumphant. When she raised her gaze, sunlight poured through the tall windows, wrapping her in gold. Later that evening, she stood in her new office, watching the city lights shimmer. The walls were different now, no plaques of luxury, just quiet photos of progress and a single framed object on her desk: her hospital bracelet. Olivia entered softly. "They're waiting downstairs," she said. Grace turned. "Who?" Olivia hesitated. "Helen Miller." Grace's chest tightened. The mother-in-law who once called her a curse now stood downstairs, waiting like a shadow from another life. Moments later, Helen entered the office, her eyes red and weary. "Grace," she whispered, "I had no right to treat you the way I did. I believed lies. I see now what you've become, and I'm ashamed." Grace studied her for a moment, then motioned toward a chair. Sit. Helen sunk down, trembling. Ethan's gone, Grace. Prison broke him. He talks about you every day, how he should have stayed, how he threw away the only good thing he ever had. Tears streamed down her face. I came to ask, not for forgiveness, but for peace. Grace walked to the window, her reflection merging with the city below. You can have peace, she said softly. But forgiveness isn't a word, it's a choice. And I made it long ago for me, not for him. Helen nodded slowly, relief and shame mingling in her eyes. You're stronger than all of us. Grace turned back, offering a faint smile. No, I just refuse to stay broken. They stood quietly for a while, the silence filled with understanding. Outside, the night deepened and the city lights looked like stars reborn. The next morning, Grace stood in a sunlit garden beside a marble plaque that read, "The Sophia Foundation in honor of every mother who fought to live." Reporters gathered again, but this time the questions were softer. Mrs. Miller, one asked, how does it feel to own the empire that once left you to die? Grace smiled, the wind brushing her hair gently. I didn't win, she said. Truth did. A hush fell. Cameras clicked, but no one spoke. She turned toward the small statue of a mother holding her child, her eyes glistening. Beside her, little Sophia, now 5 years old, held her hand. Mommy, she whispered. Was this the place Daddy worked? Grace knelt and smiled. It was, sweetheart. But now it's the place where healing begins. The crowd applauded softly as Grace lifted Sophia into her arms. The hospital bracelet gleamed on her wrist, once a symbol of pain, now a badge of purpose. And as she walked down the garden path, the sun rising behind her, her voice carried gently through the air. For every woman who was broken and every child who gave her strength, this is not the end. It's the beginning. The camera zoomed in on the bracelet, the engraved name Grace Miller shining in gold light, then faded to white, and the world finally knew what true victory looked like.